Hi, welcome to CLUSA's discussion on navigating the internship unknown. My name is Cindy Chin. I'm a former legislative chief of staff, as well as a former internship program coordinator for an API organization that focused on providing internship program opportunities to students just like you. Political office internships provide a really unique experience, not only to develop professional working office experience, but also to learn firsthand the civic and public engagement process. By now, many of you have probably already received some initial training or orientation by your respective programs, and we hope that this discussion provides some additional insights on real life office placement scenarios and how to navigate the unknown. With me here today is Lily Hugh, who is a former API intern, and I'd like Lily to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Lily. I interned when I was a high school junior and a high school senior, both at the state and local level. I interned for former Dublin City Mayor David Halbert and former Assemblywoman Catherine Baker. And right now I am a product manager at a startup called Protect.
And I had the privilege and honor to be able to work with Lily in one of her internship placement offices. And so that's how the two of us have known each other and sort of have kept in touch after that. And so we're really happy to have Lily here. Lily, can you, although you have given what you are currently doing right now, and you haven't really necessarily pursued a career in public service after your political internship experience, are there skills or things that you learned that you felt were transferable that add additional value and benefits to your job now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like technical because when I interned, I was like only a high school student. So in reality, like, am I gonna write bills or anything? Probably not. But definitely like working in an office space and interacting with like people who are more senior than me and learning from like their organizational skills or their speaking skills was really helpful. So, for example, I feel like I learned what business casual meant, like dressing for the office every single day. And I also drove to work or drove to the internship like every single day that I worked. So I had to learn about like commuting and like when there's traffic, planning ahead for that, and also eating a big breakfast in the morning. So I feel like soft skills like that really helped me out. Definitely like when I was working, I was really shy. I feel like especially working with Cindy, I felt like I was so shy the first couple of days for the first week, but definitely like stepping out of my shell and like talking to other people and like finding a mentor in Cindy when I was working with her, that was really awesome. And also, one thing that I did in my internship is answering the phones. So a lot of constituents will call like their representatives' offices, and you as like the intern or like someone who's more junior level will oftentimes be that person who answers the phone. And I was really shy and I was really scared about that because I was like, oh my God, what if I mess up? Like what if they yell at me? What if they hate me? But definitely learning to overcome that fear and understand like all I have to do is perform my job to the best of my ability and like kind of guide them and answer their questions how like in a way that would inform them of like whatever questions that they have, and kind of transferring that to my current work, like staying confident in like adversity and learning to like be calm and control the situation best as I can.
What did you find as sort of the most surprising takeaway that you didn't expect to learn that maybe it was a pleasant surprise, or maybe you had other expectations and it wasn't that once you got into the placement and started doing the internship?
I think definitely like before I started, I was just a little nervous because I thought like people were going to be really strict and everything was going to be kind of like very stiff and traditional and kind of conservative in terms of like office culture and the way people dress and stuff. But it was super chill and casual. And I feel like it was super easy to get along with everyone in that office, I remember. And that was pretty surprising.
That's good to hear. You mentioned sort of coming into it, being shy and not sure what to do, and answering the phones can be terrifying because you have no idea what's going to be on the other end. It's like no two phone calls are going to be the same, or They're going to ask you really tough questions, or it might be a very angry constituent. Generally, when people call an office, they don't call because they're happy with the elected official. They're usually upset about something, right? And what did you learn from that? And I mean, something as simple as answering the phone, it can be terrifying, but how did you work through that?
Um, well, for me, when I answered those like phone calls, I kind of just had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't personal. Like what they're mad at isn't me or the office itself or like me as an intern. They're kind of upset about their situation and they just want to be heard. So for me, just understanding like, oh, like I should just be someone who's listening to them, jotting down notes and like passing them on to the assemblywoman or like you, for example. So definitely like staying calm, not taking things personally. That helped me overcome a lot of like defensiveness, I feel like, when people got really mad, when I felt like it was like at me, but it's actually not.
That's a really good point about it not being personal, and you raise a really good point. Oftentimes when those angry constituents call, it's because they haven't been heard and they want to be heard. So listening is such a skill set that people, I think, uh, don't take for granted that it's not a big deal. I think people are so, and particularly I think interns, I was an intern in an office too. And I interned in my high school as well in college for my state's governor. And I thought that I had to know everything. Like I thought I had to be briefed on like every policy issue. And, when someone called, like I didn't want to be stumped. But would you say that it's okay the expectation is that you're not supposed to know everything?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in high school. Well, I feel like any intern who is like working for an office or even in the corporate world, like your expectation is not that you have to know everything, it's that you're willing to learn everything. So definitely like if you don't know what you're doing, that's okay, but make sure to communicate that so that you can find the necessary help in order to learn how to do the things that you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that really helps diffuse the angry caller or the constituent, right? If they know that they're being heard, you're explaining to them, I'm going to pass this on to the elected, to the mayor or the assembly member, and that somebody would get back to them with an answer that you didn't know it, but you would find the person that would. I think that's what the expectation that the offices have, is that they don't expect you to know policy or the ins and outs of a specific bill that someone's calling, because in some states, there's thousands of bills. There's no way that any one person can know everything about all the bills that get introduced. But folks just want to be heard. And what a learning experience that is, because you really hear from the community firsthand on sort of what the issues that they care about are most pressing in that community. You mentioned, Lily, that you did an internship program twice. Can you talk a little bit sort of like how did you come to that decision and what the difference was between the two internship experiences?
Yeah, for sure. So I interned through a program called CAPA, which I think stands for the Chinese American Political Association. They have like this internship. I don't know if it's still active. It probably is, but I interned through them twice because at the time when I was applying to college or like figuring out what I wanted to do in the future, I was leaning towards political science and I really wanted to understand how the government works, which is why I did the internship like twice essentially. The first one was local, so I worked with David Halbert. That was great. Like I feel like I was really involved with the Dublin community as a whole. I'm from Dublin, so like getting to like give back to my community was really cool. We started something called the Dublin Mayor's Council the summer that I worked with him. And the Dublin Mayor's Council is essentially a way for high school students to kind of bring in their own insights or like any things that they want improvement on to the mayor and see any of that like getting executed, which was pretty cool. And from that summer, I remember like I got to go to a lot of very local Dublin events that I might not have gone to in the past. And also, I've never stepped foot in the Dublin city center before. And that was my first time kind of like going there almost on a weekly basis and working with him. So that was cool. Then in my second internship with Catherine Baker, that was awesome. Like I got to work in office all the time and really get to experience what it meant to work in an office for the first time. I went to a bunch of community events. Like I went to Camp Parks in Dublin. I remember that was my first time stepping into Camp Parks, which is like an army base in Dublin. It's kind of private. You can't really just go in. So to go that and see like a ceremony happen, that was cool. Then we also went to a 4th of July celebration, where I got to meet the other like interns who are also working with Catherine Baker, and that was really cool. Felt very close knit. But I think in my second internship with Catherine Baker, I read a lot about different legislation bills that she was involved in or just like were out there. And I felt like I learned a lot from that experience in terms of like what bills were currently on the floor and how things get passed along. It really felt like I was experiencing AP Gov, but in real life, which is cool. And I got to go to Sacramento. Like I went to the Capitol and Catherine took me around for the day, and that was really cool too. I don't think I would have had that experience if I didn't have the internship. So yeah, really good experiences.
You mentioned a lot of different things that you were involved in both internships at the local level and the state level. And, not, there's no two placements that are going to be the same for an intern, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think in your experience, it sounds like your mentors or your office placements really took the time to provide opportunities for you to learn all aspects of it. And I know that that might not be the case for all placements. So what sort of advice could you provide to other interns that are sort of like, I come in and I do the same thing every day, which is okay, there's work that needs to be done that has to be done, and some of it isn't glamorous. But there are the unique experiences to get out in the community or really learn more about bills. What would be your advice to interns to sort of how to pick up more tasks or projects or be included on things? Because it sounds like you had some unique experiences where the elected officials themselves were hands-on with you and you had direct access. And that may not be the case like in congressional offices and things like that, because the member may not be around as much.
Yeah, that's a good question. Right off the bat, I want to say like keep an open mind. You never know what experiences you're gonna get if you keep saying no to things or just keep being closed-minded towards things. Yeah, I would say like there are quote unquote unglamorous aspects of the job, but the good thing about you being an intern in the office is that anything you do will directly impact the community. Like answering constituent phone calls, that is directly helping out someone in your community. Or like I made a lot of certificates for like sports teams or people on the local level or the government like state level accomplishing something like winning a swim meet or a track meet or something. I made certificates for those. That's directly impacting the community and might be considered like an admin task. Or like sorting through the mail, like the mail you get is from constituents, like you are doing something that impacts the community. So I guess in that sense, like keep an open mind to like everything that you're doing. But the second thing is like if you don't like what you're doing or if you're just bored with your job, you should be able to find someone in the office, get to know them, and tell them, this is what I'm interested in. Can some sort of my work be applied in this like direction? So, for example, like it's not like I would have gotten to visit the state capitol if I hadn't asked for that. Like you should be able to feel brave to ask for things because as much as like you're doing the internship, your office is also involved in the internship process as well. Like they're there to kind of guide you through your internship experience. They're there to provide you with the best time because at the end of the day, it's not like Catherine Baker is going to be like, oh, I hope Lily had a terrible time in my office. Like there's no way that's going to happen. They definitely want you to have a great time and they want you to learn a lot and be happy in your job. Like they don't want you to just come from 9 to 5, like be bored sitting there the entire time. So make sure to like be brave enough to ask those questions about what you want to do. And if you don't know what you want to do yet, that's okay too. Like find a mentor, talk to someone and kind of figure out what your interests are and be able to apply them to whatever you're working on.
That's really great advice, Lily. You mentioned something very interesting about the hours of 9 to 5. While those are typically business hours for most places, I think, as you know, working for an elected official, whether it's the city mayor, the state level, or even the federal level and your congressional members, you can see that it is not a 9 to 5 job for the elected or their staff. And it goes beyond those hours into the evenings and on weekends. And a lot of those community things that you talk about, that you got to attend, didn't always happen in the hours to 9 to 5. And so I think when you say be open to those experiences, and if your schedule permits, to be able to participate in saying those things. Sometimes we had a lot of other interns in the office that, were getting, like you, high achieving in their academics and involved in so many other extracurricular activities that sometimes they just couldn't attend a town hall with the assembly member and staffer. We had you go and staff her with staff, like what's the day in a life of what we did as staff. And we really, and at least in the office, we really wanted to make sure the interns felt like they were part of our team and not just an intern in the office answering the phones. And we hope, and that's an experience I hope most interns have. And if you don't, how to sort of ask for that to be involved. And I think Lily makes a really good point and gives some really great advice about, don't try not to say no to everything, be open, try to say yes to things if your schedule could permit, because it opens other opportunities. You might see things or learn about things that surprise you, that you may not have an interest in, or you don't understand the impact. Lily talks about making certificates, because it was very important to our office that Lily worked in, that the elected really wanted to make sure that when people in the community, whether it was students, adults, community organizations, if they did something that was worthy of acknowledgement, she wanted to bring the prestige of the office to the event or to those students or those individuals, to the community, to show that their impact or that they've achieved, a high milestone was important to the office. And, we talk about, how to get more opportunity to do things, how to ask, how to show interest. And you mentioned finding a mentor. Like how important really is that?
For me, I did not have a mentor, or I guess my mentor was David Halbert. Like he basically was the person who communicated with me about my work and everything. And for that internship, I didn't formally like work in an office or anything. I kind of just attended meetings with him, and then it was mostly like community outreach and working together with the team to kind of start the mayor's council. So we didn't really like work in the office. So I don't think like I would have met with the mentor very like often. Whereas in Catherine Baker's office, like I had a lot more staff members who were there, and because I was in the office, I got to like talk to all of them every single day, so that was a lot easier. But in terms of the importance of a mentor, I think it's important in any context, like in life too. Like mentors are there to kind of support you in whatever you're going through, and might be able to provide like any advice that maybe your friends might not be able to, just because your mentor is someone who is probably more experienced with you in some aspect. So for example, in my internship with Catherine Baker, I remember I think Cindy drove me home from like the Camp Parks like ceremony or something, and talking to her and kind of learning about her perspective, especially like as an Asian in government, like that was pretty cool and really helped me again like come out of my shell a bit in terms of like shyness. And I thought that was really helpful. And yeah, finding a mentor might not be like the easiest thing, because it does require some amount of like putting yourself out there and getting to know someone, but the payoff and kind of rewards are very fruitful, and I feel like it's always worth it. Like it's always worth it to have someone on your side, so why not?
Lily, when I worked, before I became a chief of staff in the office that I was in, I wasn't always a chief of staff. I was an intern too. And I was very fortunate enough to find someone that was willing to mentor me. And I had kept in touch with them after my internship placements. It helped me catapult me into other positions. It opened other doors to other things. I never thought that I would make a career in um, being a staffer or in public service, but I did, and that's awesome. But not everyone wants to, and that's okay. I think the fundamental purpose of these internship programs are really to provide some lessons firsthand on the civic process and to encourage and show the importance of to be civically engaged, even if you're not going to make a career out of all of this. And so would you say that after doing both of these internships that you are more civic minded after sort of finishing school and now you're in the sort of working world and things like that? Do you look back on the internships and think, I'm not sure if I would have been as civically engaged or in tune with what's going on had it not been for the internship programs?
I would say the internship process experiences, like both times, really helped me understand like local government, just how much like community planning was involved and how much like it takes a village basically to like run any sort of event that's happening or like just support any office out there. So I think that's what mainly like open or like kind of made me realize when I was working in these internships in terms of like civic participation and stuff. I think my high school did a really good job of kind of like drilling that into us. And like even now, like I live in New York now and I get mail to like vote every single week, every single day it's in my mailbox. So I wouldn't say like the internship really increased my like civic participation. It just kept on enhancing it because I knew so many people were working really hard. That made me want to like, also be involved in whatever way I can. And right now that way is like voting or like donating or like doing my research before I say something or like support something. So I think that's something that really helped me from the internship.
And I think we can pivot a little bit to sort of what could be sticky situations in an office. I mean, I don't know if you had any and sort of how to advise to navigate difficult situations or challenging situations in an office.
Yeah. Personally, I never experienced this. I feel like I didn't really have any conflicts with anyone or anything really. But in the corporate world, I have had a lot of those experiences. I don't know if I should talk about that. Yeah, so like I feel like in my internships, like when I went to college, I interned in like finance and tech. So in those experiences, you meet a lot of different people who are very interesting. I would say as interesting as those constituent phone calls that I've received. Um, so I feel like in difficult situations like that, again, I don't think people are like mad at you, they're mad at the situation. So like for example, if a project deadline keeps getting pushed back and the people you're handing off the project to are like continuously asking for it because you're messing up their timeline, oftentimes that's like not really all on you. That's like on the situation and the pipeline as a whole. So again, like understanding that like when they're mad, they're not mad at you. And I think that keeps toning or like diffusing the anger a lot. In other difficult situations, maybe like an actual conflict between you and a manager, um, you should feel empowered to speak up about anything, which means that, let's say, for example, that you don't get along with a staffer in your office, you should be empowered to speak to that elected official, or you should be empowered to speak to other staffers in the office. Because, like, it's not good to feel like you're being silenced. It's always good to like speak up for yourself and like talk to other people and maybe get a second opinion or just like an outside perspective on the situation in order to get advice. And this is also where like a mentor could come into play. So when I worked at my like old internships and stuff, my mentors were always the ones who that I would turn to and ask them like, hey, this thing happened, like how do you think I should address it or how do you think I should talk to them? And your mentor will be a great resource in terms of like letting you know like, okay, like this is how we do things, like maybe in the future watch out for that, or oh, that doesn't seem right. Like, let me look into it and like let you know how you should best move forward with this situation. So something like that. I feel like that would be the best advice that I can provide if you're in a difficult situation.
I think that's good advice. I think there's a way to sort of speak up for yourself without being confrontational, right? I think tone and delivery and how you articulate yourself matters to get your point across, right? And in a way that's non-confrontational, and you're just really keeping it professional, and you're taking the personal element out of it. I think you raise a really good point. And whether it's this internship that you're doing now, or later in your professional working development in any office setting, there's always, not everyone's always going to get along, and you're just going to have to figure out how to do that and be a professional in the office and still manage to get your work done, and meet your expectations that are expected of you from your supervisor. But I think having the mentor, that's exactly what happened for me too, Lily. I mentioned before that I had mentors that were really great, to be able to be a great sounding board and provide some guidance, and recommendations and suggestions on like, well, this is perhaps try it this way, this approach. And I have to say, there's some things that I got on in early training, in whether it was my workforce development and trainings. And if your work offers those, or your program offers, training development, I suggest to take them, because you can always learn something. You may not everything, but there might be just one takeaway. And for me, I think that's worth it to do the trainings, because you just never know what you can pick up and what you incorporate moving forward as you develop your professional working career. Sort of going back on the sticky situations, were you ever asked, and this might come up, and I don't know if this still happens, but it happened to me, where the office I'd have to do other duties other than what was sort of laid out in any kind of job descriptions, whether it was like fetching coffee, or getting somebody's lunch, or things like that. Were you ever asked to do that? And if so, how did you manage it?
Personally, I was never asked to do that. And for my other friends in the internship program with Kappa, like we did a lot of training about this, actually, about like what happens if you're told to do something that's like outside of your internship duties. Maybe not like a project, but like getting coffee or lunch. We talked about how that is not something that is going to like kind of further your professional development, because you're just running to go get some coffee. So we talked about like perhaps like suggesting it as like a group event. Like if you're being asked to get coffee, like you can maybe say like, oh, let's have like a team coffee or something, like not just kind of pushing it on you, kind of distributing that. In terms of like a project that you might not want to do, I think that's happened to me a lot, not in my like government internships, but like in the corporate world. But in government internships, like let's say that your staffer or your manager like gives you something you don't want to do. I wouldn't outright say no. I feel like that's not the most professional thing to do. Maybe talk about it to your mentor. Again, the mentor is very important, I feel like, in this context, like being able to talk to them and very like able to clearly articulate why you don't want to do it, and then figure out like, is it you don't want to do it because you think it's tedious, you don't want to do it because you think it's like useless, you don't want to do it because you just don't want to do it, like why is that reason? And then from then on, like oftentimes if it's like, oh, you think it's tedious, well, like I said, reflecting back on like the certs and like, or creating the certificates and like answering the phone calls, everything will reflect back on the community. So like if you don't want to do it, think about who this is going to help out. And afterwards, like you can always go back to your manager and say like, oh, this was like a really interesting project, like XYZ was good about it, but in the future I'd like work that more aligns closely to ABC interest or something else, you know? So yeah, it's important to keep an open mind, but if it's something you don't want to do and you're consistently being given it, then it would be smart to do a little bit pushback in terms of like asking for something that you actually want to do, not like saying, no, I don't want to do this. Like, give me something else. So,
And from what I'm hearing from you, it seems like the common theme here to sort of the solutions of this all is really honing in on your communication skills to be able to
yeah,
communicate your questions. And sometimes maybe from the office perspective, you might think a project like, oh, this is kind of lame, right? Or what's the point of this? And perhaps if the office provided some additional context by asking questions and communicating, you might think, oh, there actually is really significant impact of this project because I'm not seeing it full picture. But if they can give you context in that, and sometimes the offices, they're just moving so fast that they may not have thought to sort of give you full context of it all and just say, I just need this one part done. And I think with that open line of communication that you could do to ask the question and sort of remind the office, like, can you give me a little bit context and explanation? Then you might think, oh, this is significant. Maybe this isn't as lame or tedious as I thought it was going to be. This has significant impact to the community or addressing constituent concerns.
yeah, definitely. I'd say like asking questions is super important too, because you always want to understand like why are you doing this, or why this project, or why are we like handing out certificates, like why do I need to attend this event? Like asking those questions why will help you understand your work better and also show the other party that you're actually interested in what you're doing, and that always feels nice too.
I think that's a big thing from an office perspective. We went through the days and there's not enough hours in the day to get everything done. And we want to try to do everything and you just can't, you have to prioritize. But at the same time, our office really wanted to make sure that our interns had a good experience in the office, that they were learning something and that we needed to take a pause to try to explain what the purpose behind the work was and what our end goal was so that you could see sort of like why, like in the big picture, this is important of everything. And we really prided ourselves to really provide an opportunity that, whoever it was could look back and think, I learned a lot in that office. And I took a lot of those things forward in college, in my first job out of college and beyond. And that's what we hope that at least from an internship coordinator and having worked in a legislative office, that was our objective, to make sure that our interns had a good experience. As much as, the interns are looking to do well because they want a good recommendation. They don't want to represent the program poorly. The office itself, most of them also want to have a good impression on the interns too. So know that it's a two-way street for the office and the intern. It's not just like, oh, you're the intern, you're the one getting more out of it than the office. That's not true. The office is getting as much from the intern as the intern is giving. And just to go back on the sticky situation on whether or not, like if you asked to go get coffee, I was told a long time ago in a fellowship program that I did. And it was the speaker's office that said, yeah, you should go get the sandwich if they need a sandwich because they can't break from their committee hearings or something and can't get it. And if you're asked to do it, like offer to do it, but tell them to get their own mustard. Sort of in a flippant way, like I'll get your sandwich, but you can get your own mustard sort of thing. Or for us in the office, sometimes we try to do exactly what you mentioned, Lily, in sort of making a team kind of outing to build morale. Sometimes one of us, mainly probably me, was like, I need a boba break because I don't drink coffee. And so whoever was interning in the office, the elected would actually, she liked boba too. So she would do a boba round for the entire office, including all the interns, whoever was in the office who wanted one could have one. And so I think kind of making it that kind of group thing and like a team thing is a way to sort of diffuse that scenario. The intern might go out and help go get the boba, but they're getting a boba too with it. Like everyone is getting one. And so they're going with another staffer as an extra set of hands. So we oftentimes in the office, we really made sure that we weren't asking any intern to do something that we were not willing to do ourselves.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I,
for sure.
and I would think that that is the case for most office placements, especially because you're coming in from a program. The office is technically not providing you any compensation other than the experience. And so, they probably more than likely won't ask you to do those sort of unofficial assigned duties, but maybe you do, and that's a positive way to sort of turn it around and say, sure, I'm happy to do it, but let's do it together. Um, and sort of the other part is, we talked about like interns, it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of the program. When when interns conclude their program, what sort of advice would you give them on sort of asking for a letter of recommendation, or helping when you need college admission letters? What kind of advice would you give interns to sort of, I guess, would be considered in the working world like an exit interview?
Yeah. I'd say at the end, definitely like keep your lines of communication open. You don't want to just do the internship and forget about the people. I think it's good to like connect with them and keep them updated with like what's going on in your life. And I'm sure they appreciate that too. Like I feel like if someone interned for me, like I had an intern last year and this year, like she texted me and she was like, this is what I'm up to. Like, like let's meet up when I'm back in the city. And I was like, yeah, of course. Like that always feels nice. And it's nice to know that like they enjoyed their time there. So I would definitely say like definitely stay connected with these people that you've worked with. I'd say the letter of rec is pretty important. Personally, I definitely should have done that when I was applying to colleges. I feel like that would have looked really good too. Um, yeah, I would say the letter of rec is important. And when you're doing the quote unquote like exit interview, which I don't think is a very like formal process, like when they're giving you feedback, make sure to be very open to that because they've worked with you too. So like they know what you potentially need to improve on, what you did really well on, like what you could work on in the future. Like those are very important like aspects of feedback that you need to be able to take and handle very well. The other thing is like be able to like give feedback to the office. Like if there was something you didn't like about the internship or something you felt like could have been improved, then tell them because they'll fix it for next year's interns. And if there's something that you really liked, also tell them because everyone likes to have some sort of compliment. So that's very nice. And another thing is like make sure to remember what you did in the internship. Like, how many events you attended, like what kind of certs you were making, all that stuff, because um in my job interviews or my internship interviews in the future, like when I was in college and even for like my full-time job offers, like I talked about my internship experiences with like Mayor David Halbert when I was like doing the interview process with those like companies and stuff. And everyone, maybe not everyone, but like a lot of people are impressed that I, like used to work in public service and like really like intern and like made an impact in my community, which was really cool too. So yeah, make sure to remember what you did and like be able to like, you know, draw back on those things and like definitely stay in contact and get that letter of rec. I'd say those are my big takeaways.
You mentioned that you talked about your experience during your interview process to show that you had skill sets. Because, I think especially coming out of college, not everyone has worked in an office environment, and you're applying for a job in sort of an office environment, even if it might be these days in a remote environment, it's still an office working environment. And so I think that there's some skills that transfer, even if you're not going to have a job in public service or work for elected or even run for office. Did you actually use the internship listed on your resume?
Um,
Work experience?
by the time I was interning, I got rid of like all my high school stuff because like when you're in college, you shouldn't really have high school stuff anyways. But because it wasn't on my resume, sometimes like corporate people are weird. They like to ask questions like, "Oh, like what kind of experiences did you have that aren't on your
Yeah.
or aren't on your resume?" Or like, what, like how what other commitments do you have that like aren't listed on your resume? And you can always talk about like previous things and like government experiences and stuff. And that was super helpful. Yeah, sorry, I forgot the rest of your question. Do you mind
It's okay.
repeating
No,
that?
I had used my internships on my resume,
Mhm.
but because I didn't have any other work, like office work experience, and at the time I was applying for something in an office environment, it happened to also be political, so it kind of went hand in hand to show that I had experience. And at some point, when I gained more experience, like you, those things fell off the resume. But at the beginning, when I was applying, or if I was applying for another internship, I think it shows, one, I can work in a professional office working environment and be professional. Two, it shows that like I could be reliable, I'll show up on time, and all of those things are important for an internship. I don't think they're necessarily looking for you to be like subject matter experts on whatever the office does. But they're really, I think, looking for someone who is reliable, who can conduct themselves in a professional working environment, and is a good worker. And so I used it on my resume. And so when you mentioned you used it in your interview, that's why I was asking. But at some point
Yeah.
they did fall off. But initially, when I didn't have that strong resume as I was coming out of college, or I was applying for another internship in college, I had the high school internship. And for me, it was the governor's office. So, that was, I think these internship placements that you all do, not everyone does them. It is a unique experience that not everyone in the population does or have the opportunity to. So it's a very unique experience, and you should definitely leverage your experience for your future jobs, even your college admissions. And when you said you should try to list everything and all your duties and responsibilities or projects you worked on, and I think that's a good for any job that you have too, because you're going to be probably listing those things in your resume as bullet points on what responsibilities you had. But particularly in the internship, because you mentioned, we talked a little bit about the letter of recommendation. We did a ton. We had a lot of interns come to us, maybe not at the end of the internship and say, can I get a letter? It's sometimes when it came to college admissions that I need the letter of recommendation. Can you please do it? And sometimes, we had a lot of interns that came to the office, so we couldn't remember like every specific thing that everyone did, because some interns did certain things and others didn't. And so I think keeping that, because I would ask them like, what would you like me to focus on this letter on? And they would be able to provide sort of the list of things that they did. So I think that that's really important. And I think as you move on in your professional career, those are good things to have, whether you're talking to your supervisor about your review and whether or not you should get a raise or a promotion, you have that sort of list of things, right, to show, your performance and that you produce results. I think that that's really important. But we use that to customize the college admission letters, the recommendations, instead of just giving like this canned letter, which we had a template. But when we were able to actually talk about specific things that the intern could work on, we were able to personalize the letters to really show that like, wow, this elected really knew the intern and their responsibilities in the office.
Nice.
I think we may be at our end of our discussion. I think, Lily, we can probably talk days about the internship experience in the program. But is there any sort of parting words that you may have for our current interns that are out there placed in offices?
Make sure to have a good time. If you're worried about something not working out, or if you're freaking out about something, just remember that things always fall into place, and take it one step at a time, and try and find a mentor. I'd say pretty much it for me.
Well, thanks, Lily. I really enjoyed our discussion. It's always great to sort of reflect back and look back on the good times that we had working together. It was a privilege to work with you and see you in your element now in your, going through college and having finished and working. It's nice to reconnect with you. And I hope that we continue to keep in touch. I want to thank everybody for listening in our discussion. And please tune in to see LUSA on future trainings and discussions for the internship.